I want to say it wasn't hard, but it was a little tricky. Hello everyone, thank you for coming or for coming back. Today I am very excited to show you this video because it was a little bit of a challenge and I like a good challenge. Now if you bake or cook or anything like that, then you probably have a dish or a type of dish that has always been a little bit harder for you than the other ones, and for me it has always been pastry. Starting out it was pie dough, and then I got better and it was puff pastry, and then maybe croissants. And today I decided to try making phyllo dough. Now, phyllo or phyllo dough is one of those ones that has always been really interesting to me because no matter how many recipes I read that call for it, they always say to use store-bought. No one ever recommends to make your own phyllo dough because it's just so persnickety and annoying, and it just takes a long time and you have to roll it really thin. And so I decided that today I was going to try making it from scratch. So let's start on that, and if you want the ingredients and all the measurements are down below, so check that out if you are crazy enough to try making this. So to start, we are going to mix together the salt and the flour. Then to that we are going to add our oil, water, vinegar, and egg yolk. You're going to mix this by hand until it has come together enough you can turn it out onto a surface and knead it. Now we want to knead this until it is a very soft, smooth ball, so anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. Now next we are going to wrap it up in plastic and let it rest at room temperature for an hour and a half to 2 hours before we come back and roll it out. Now there are two methods of rolling out the dough that I could find, and both have their different advantages and disadvantages, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we go through them. So depending on which method you decide to use, you're going to divide up your dough into either 20 gram or 65 gram pieces, and as you divide these up, you want to smooth them out into nice round balls, and you want to keep them covered the whole time that you're not working with them so that they don't dry out. So the first method is probably the easier of the two, and for this you are going to take about 5 of the 20 gram balls of dough. You're going to coat them each in cornstarch and then roll them out until they are about 1/4 centimeter thick. Then you're going to stack them all on top of each other, making sure there's a good amount of cornstarch in between, and you're going to roll out the whole pile just like as if it was one piece of dough. Now this will make it easier to stretch it thinner, and what you want to do is you want to roll it out until it's about double the size, and then you're going to unstack the pile very carefully and put in more cornstarch so that they don't stick to each other. So I found that when I was rolling these out, the piece of dough that was on the bottom always ended up getting smushed a little bit smaller than the ones that were on the top. So when I peeled them apart to re-cornstarch them, I like to rearrange them so that the smallest one ended up on top and the biggest one was on the bottom, so that I could try and make them a similar size. Now you're going to roll these out again after you restack them, and this size of dough should get you about a 10-inch diameter circle. And once you're done, you can go ahead and unstack them again and put them anywhere until you're ready to use them. I like to just have them on a piece of parchment covered in a damp towel so that they don't dry out. So this method was relatively easy to do in my opinion, and as well I thought it was really great that if you are making something that is layered like baklava and you're doing it in a circular pan, then I think it'd be really easy to adjust the weight of the dough balls that you have so that you'll end up with a perfect size circle to fit your pan. Now on the other side, this one was a little bit more difficult because you really had to make sure you were using a lot of cornstarch so that these layers didn't stick together because they were in a pile and you were pretty much smushing them together. Now for the second method, we are going to need a little bit more space and a little bit more dough. So taking one of the larger balls of dough, you're going to go ahead and coat both sides in cornstarch, and you're going to roll it out again until it is about 1/4 centimeter thick. Now at this point you're going to need a much larger rolling pin. So here I'm using a dowel. I saw a video where someone suggested that you use a wooden broom handle, but I didn't have one of those, so I just used my dowel here. And what you're going to do is you're going to roll the dough up in the dowel and then pretty much use the dough to flatten itself out. Now, I don't want to give too much instruction here because this was pretty much my second time ever doing it. And I do think that this is a technique that really needs a lot of skill and practice to get good at. So a couple things that I found were really helpful when trying to do this is, first of all, you want to try and roll out in longer motions instead of like really short, fast ones to get it to roll out. I found that it got less wrinkles in the dough. As well, these wrinkles were pretty much the biggest problem that I had when making these. So I found it that if you stretch the dough a little bit while you're rolling it up in the pin, it helps to avoid the wrinkles a little bit. Now, I will say that I don't think that the dowel I was using for this was quite thick enough. So if I do this again, I'll probably try and find a much thicker dowel to use, and I think that'll probably solve a couple of my problems. So this technique definitely takes a little bit of skill and a little bit of practice to master. I would really like to keep doing this and get better at it and try again. So one thing that I really liked about this method was that if you roll it out into a big circle, then it's a lot easier to cut it down into rectangles, and normally that's how you would get phyllo dough anyways. It would be in rectangular sheets and not a big circle. That is a little bit harder to work with depending on what you're doing with it. As well, I thought it was just so much fun. This was such an interesting way to roll out dough. I have seen a video where someone makes pasta using a very similar method to this, so I thought that was so much fun. I really wanted to do the pasta one, but I think doing it with the phyllo dough was even cooler. One thing that I will say about this method is that it takes up a lot of space. So if your counters are pretty small or narrow, then you definitely want to find a bigger table where you can roll these out. I was really happy with how my dough turned out. I thought it was really thin, especially for like my first or second time making it. And I wouldn't recommend that you do this every single time that you do phyllo dough, but I think if you have an extra little bit of time and you want to try this out, then I would definitely suggest that you go for it. Give it a go. It's so much fun. And it really wasn't like, I want to say it wasn't hard, but it was a little tricky, but it was easier than I thought it would be. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.